Name me one person who's undermining the royal institution in Thailand, who can be put in jail in Turkey for making fun of President Erdogan, and who's in a Twitter fight with Ecuador's president. Well, there is pretty much only one person with that kind of record. John Oliver, host of HBO's Last Week Tonight, is now a prominent figure in American comedy. But not only does he make fun of world leaders, he dares to ask Edward Snowden if the NSA can see our dick pics, as well as hosting a television show full of puppets and Game of Thrones references in the show set. Such brilliant comedy is now renowned, as well as his team's ability to address disturbingly important issues, both for which the show's been rewarded by a lot of prizes, including 4 Emmy Awards. Now, Oliver's show takes place amid a wider American late-night television industry that aims at providing entertainment from the political scene. Each of those shows fall under a different network, in Oliver's case HBO, but Last Week Tonight stands out in its format. It's a 30 minutes long piece on one topic without commercial breaks that appears only once a week. This format can seem disadvantageous for a number of reasons. First, all the news from the last week will have been analyzed and processed. As Oliver puts it, if something happens on a Monday, realistically all the meat is going to be picked off that bone by the time it gets to us. There's probably barely a point in doing it. And I think we'll be attracted to some extent by stories that are off the grid. Our show may end up skewing more international in terms of stories. Secondly, the length of the show makes it hard for an auditor to focus and listen to one person for 30 minutes. When developing the show, Tim Carville, the executive producer, said that they realized early on that you don't necessarily want to hear anybody talk to you for half an hour straight. So we're constructing these little produced comedy elements that will serve the function of commercial breaks throughout the show. The little construction things he's referencing to are, and now this, and how is this still a thing? Short pieces on satirical topics that allow the audience to forget Oliver between the two segments. Eventually, the choice of the topics aren't exactly sexy, featuring issues as the Medicaid gap, prisoner reentry, or mental health. Oliver even recognized it on his second episode.
I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait, you're not going to really do a comic take on the death penalty, right? It's your second episode. I haven't even decided if I like this show yet.
But sticking to that format and coping with its problems, even solving them, is probably the biggest strength of the program, because it creates something that's new and unique. Late-night talk shows focus primarily on Washington politics, and the supposed predecessor of Last Week Tonight, The Daily Show, was no exception. But Oliver chose a different path, and focused on stories that had few coverage but wide impact. Where Oliver and his team stand out is that they have the time and the resources to investigate and write a comprehensive segment. They know how to deconstruct complex themes into simple and funny metaphors. Just see another quote from a clip on the Internal Revenue Service.
It's likeable. Think of our government as a body. The IRS is the anus. It's nobody's favourite part, but you need that thing working properly or everything goes to shit real quick.
Or in an interview with Edward Snowden.
But this is the most visible line in the sand for people. Can they see my dick? So with that in mind, look inside that folder.
See, grasping the extent of the government surveillance program by asking just one little question is just very clever. Where I definitely appreciate this show is how far it's willing to invest itself into its causes. From creating a
Brothers and sisters, welcome to Our Lady of Perpetual Exemption.
To setting up a
or
company
carp
to buy medical
after the
debt.
bottom-feeding fish.
Now on the
I
content,
became chairman
Oliver
of the board.
discards any news that are focused on the ephemera of politics. Compared to his peers that constantly referred to the election last year, which by the way probably resulted in a bit more partisanship, the show didn't talk about the campaign unless it mattered, to have an informative piece of news to help voters understand the candidates and the party ideologies and plans. Oliver even justified why he didn't have interest in the daily indignities of the election, stating that there is plenty of other people who will do that. Furthermore, he repeatedly challenged the assumption that Democrats are always the progressives, and that conservatives' mindsets can be helped. He refers to that on his piece about school segregation, where New York, a Democrat state, is the most school segregated in the country. He also reminded on a piece on fake news that despite Republicans' huge chunk of false information in articles, Democrats' pages add also around 20% of false statements, which is still terrible, which makes him focus more on facts than just on parties. This attention to detail at being an unbiased media is what we need after this year's loss of confidence in the traditional media. Broadly speaking, journalism is suffering, mainly economically due to the digital transition, but some media outlets have been thriving. One of them is Last Week Tonight. Certainly, it does take its content from other journalists, which is why the show dismisses itself from being journalism. But it is a unique program because it grabs our passion for superficial, entertaining things such as cats or funny videos on the internet to make us also understand government policies or retirement plans. It proves that comedy is a real tool, that it does a great job at reducing power imbalances between politicians or big companies and the people. It is crucially important in a democracy to see the powerful being sometimes laughed at. It means that we see their flaws without being too offensive to them. And John Oliver is the new benchmark of this badly needed comedy. When I asked one of the writers of the show what topics they will cover next year, he replied he couldn't talk about the show, so I guess we'll see what they do.